The whole community was one big family. If somebody was sick, your mother was sick or something, the other family, they'd all bring food over. You never wanted for anything. Your door, there was no such thing as a key. Your doors were always open. Anybody could walk in anytime. That's the way things were down in Fox Point.
My mother worked during the day, like most of the women worked in Fox Point. She worked in a jewelry factory. Some of the women worked at Brown University cleaning. Some of the people worked on the east side cleaning.
Us guys, when we went out, if we did something wrong, we met an old-timer, and he'd tell us about it, and he'd go home and tell your mother and father about it too. So we had to be on our P's and Q's with them because they report back to Ma and Pa. And if they hit you, you better not go home and tell them anything because you'd get another beating on top, right?
Fox Point, it's a place you'll never find another place like Fox Point. I don't care where you go. That's why I stay here. Yeah, and I love Fox Point.
Fox Point, a neighborhood in Providence, Rhode Island, where I was born and raised, is gone. It exists now only in the memories of the people who tell this story. My grandparents, like most of the residents of Fox Point, were immigrants from the Cape Verde Islands, a former Portuguese colony. Cape Verde is a small archipelago of 10 islands, 350 miles off the coast of West Africa, and slightly larger than the state of Rhode Island. Uninhabited prior to discovery, Cape Verde was colonized by the Portuguese in 1462. Ribeira Grande on the island of Santiago was the capital and the first permanent European settlement in the tropics. The settlers engaged in commerce and the lucrative slave trade on the nearby Guinea coast of West Africa. Slaves were brought ashore here at the first slave market in West Africa for the transatlantic slave trade.
Here are the voyage 1785, Captain Peter Wanton, owners John Brown, the brig Providence.
The biggest slave traders in the 1700s were merchants from Rhode Island, who prospered from the triangular trade between New England, Africa, and the West Indies. Pirate attacks and the declining slave trade in the late 1700s pushed the capital inland to Praia. By the time slavery was abolished in 1869, almost every slave in Cape Verde had escaped to the interior of the islands or was freed. Today, Santiago, the largest island, is home to over half the country's 400,000 people. Cape Verdeans evolved as a mix of Portuguese settlers, Africans, and European voyagers on sailing ships stopping in Cape Verde for supplies and water. The official language is Portuguese, and the mother tongue is Creole, a mixture of 16th century Portuguese and African languages. In this poor country with limited natural resources, Cape Verdeans, predominantly Catholic, anxiously wait and pray for chuba, or rain, in this drought-stricken land. Then the markets are full of the staples of the Cape Verdean diet: couve, or kale, barbara, squash, feijão, beans, and miche, corn. Beginning in the 1700s, Cape Verde suffered devastating cycles of drought and famine, where up to half the population died. Emigration was the only escape, and Cape Verde's strategic location at the crossroads of the Atlantic provided the opportunity. Cape Verdeans, especially from the islands of Brava and Fogo, were skilled seamen willing to work for low pay. 18th century whalers from New Bedford in Nantucket, Massachusetts stopped in Cape Verde to pick up crew and supplies before heading out to hunt for whales. As the whaling industry declined in the late 19th century, Cape Verdean whalers began settling in New Bedford and Nantucket and turning to land occupations. Women and families poured in after 1892 when Antonio Coelho of Brava bought the Nellie May, an old fishing schooner, and began the Brava packet trade, carrying passengers, mail, and cargo between Cape Verde and New England. Most of the first wave of immigrants were from Brava, the tiniest island known for its high altitude and lush vegetation, and the Morna, the music of the soul of Cape Verde, carried with us in the winds that guided our little ships across the Atlantic. The packets were owned mostly by Cape Verdeans, with dashing sea captains in command. By 1920, almost 40,000 Cape Verdeans arrived in the ports of New Bedford, Massachusetts and Providence, Rhode Island, America's two oldest and largest Cape Verdean communities.
Amore perto di mar, perto di mar céu, longe de boca desse mundo, nem silêncio me conha cresceu.
When the Ernestine came to Providence, the first house they came to was Mamai's house, 88 Pike Street. It was the crew and also the captain of the Ernestina and also the Madeline. The door was always open to them, and they felt at home because, like they said, they were in a strange country. But it wasn't strange to them because Mamai made them feel like, part of the family to them.
And oh, how proud if one of the captains was related to you. Papi, says Anando Oliveira, put on his World War I regalia, standing ramrod straight beside his brother, Captain Cruz, of the Madeline. Auntie Pat and Aunt Catherine got to pose on the deck of their uncle's ship, and even Cracker got to come along with Uncle Bobby. It was a huge event in the community when the ships arrived. I remember rushing down to the pier with my father to welcome the new arrivals and get news of the old country. The ship stayed in port for weeks, loading drums and trunks packed with food, clothes, and supplies for our families back in Cape Verde. We didn't have much in Fox Point, but every household sent something back, knowing that friends and family waited, anxiously searching the horizon for the ships coming from Providence and New Bedford. Without us and the schooners, they would die because the Portuguese government provided nothing.
When they left the old country, it was such a major situation when they came to America. And I remember my grandma saying that. She said to her grandmother, "When will I see you?" And the grandma said, "Not till the next life. You're in this country. Next time you see me, we'll be with the Dios," meaning with God. And my grandma cried and stuff. So they would put their music on, and that's all they had, those old records, scratching and stuff. They'd smoke their pipes and they'd be sitting there crying for days about saudade, a longing, a yearning for something or someplace that you may never have again. And it was just so touching. Her say, "You crying again?" And she'd say, "Crying for my mother, my father."
I once tried to explain to a woman what a Cape Verdean was and where we were from. She just looked at me and said, "What an obscure people." I've been called everything: black, white, nigger, pret, Portuguese, black Portuguese, métis, high yellow, or some kind of funny Puerto Rican. But I'm not, and this is a Cape Verdean American story. What happened to the Cape Verdean community here in Fox Point? What messed us up and pushed us out?
Well, first thing that happened, the people who lived around here, they gave up all the houses around here on account of the church here. They was figuring on, the only one that stayed was Mamai, that's all. My house, that's the only one that kept their house. Everybody else sold out and got out. Yeah, it's too bad.
Cape Verdeans, well, they all talked. They didn't know. They threw a few dollars at them. They thought it was a lot of money. But today they're all sorry because they're all scared. Now today, it ain't like before. The Creoles used to get together. All the Cape Verdeans, I don't care who it was. Everybody was family. But now everybody's scattered.
They scared a lot of the folks down there. They moved like Pike Street. Majority of the people moved out, except the Elves. They're the only ones that stayed behind. In fact, they just named the street after the Elves family.
This story is a quest across oceans of memory and time, searching for the Fox Point of the past and the parts that survived. My journey began many years ago with my grandmother, telling me about her voyage to America.
What island were you born?
I was born in the Northeast. St. Vincent, I did live there for quite some time. In fact, I came from St. Vincent Island.
Well, how did you meet Grandpa?
He wrote to me to Cape Verde Island, asked my mother through machine.
What island was he from?
Town.
Remember the name of the boat that took you over here?
Savoia.
How long did it take for you to get here?
48 days. I threw up first of 2 days after I left home.
My name is Eugenia Fort, and I was born November 14, 1911, in Brava, Cape Verde Islands. My father sent for us 1919. The name of the boat was Melissa Trask.
Cape Verdeans were the only people from Africa to enter America voluntarily, until 1921, when Congress enacted immigration quotas that set a limit on the number of people, including Cape Verdeans, allowed to enter the United States.
We just walked out of the boat, went into the office at Merrill's Wharf and gave your name and the whole thing, and that was it. But not anymore. But it was great to come to America. It was the new land.
The immigration legislation was preceded by the Literacy Act of 1917, requiring immigrants to be able to read in their own language to enter the United States.
They would ask them to read this paper. And immigration, of course, being from the British Isles, only understood, of course, English as well, but did not read or write Portuguese. So they handed them the paper, and little Cape Verdean women from the old country would look at the papers, and being from little villages and stuff where the men were educated and the women weren't, they would read the paper and they'd say, ay nyamai, which of course in Creole means, oh my mother, oh my mother. And immigration would snatch the papers and say, stamp them and say, pass. They thought they were reading this paper in Portuguese. They were only making a comment in reference to this paper. And it was the funniest thing, and they sent word out to each other, just say, ay nyamai. You can come to America, you know.
Cape Verdeans provided cheap labor for New England's fields, factories, and textile mills. Rhode Island became the birthplace of the American Industrial Revolution in 1793, when John Slater built the first cotton mill in the town of Pawtucket, Rhode Island. Rhode Island's first port was built in 1680 in the Fox Point section of Providence. The addition of railroads at the ports in the 1830s attracted factories and industry to the city. Irish immigrants working on the railroads and the Blackstone Canal project settled in Fox Point in the mid-1800s. Azorians and Cape Verdeans, both from Portuguese colonies, also settled in Fox Point.
Them old Cape Verdeans always tell you, you're Portuguese, you're Portuguese. Listen to what they said. The reason why they said that is because at the time we were under Portugal, and Portugal had a heavy foot on our people. And even though they had a better life in this country, they wanted to make sure nobody was going to be hurt over there. They gave it a second thought, like, you know, oh, Portuguese, oh, Clear, oh, Portuguese. Although they chose the house of Creole, you're Cape Verdean. But they definitely never said anything bad about Portugal because they had the terrible fear their government would come down heavy on the people. So they left that alone. And I think people need to understand that.
But the tension between white Portuguese, Onhambabs as we call them, and us, the Cape Verdeans, black Portuguese, continued in America.
When I was a child, I remember when we moved to Christian Avenue, well, it was more or less a white neighborhood, and when one of the kids say, Ei, prata da brava, which means, you black brava. And I was so hurt because I was only a child. And for that reason, I didn't like the Portuguese people. But it didn't matter because I was only a child. But if they approached me and said those words today, I'd tell them off, but good.
So we stayed to ourselves, living along the waterfront and taking the jobs no one wanted.
Well, majority of the people that lived around the port down there were all Cape Verdeans anyhow. The majority of them guys used to work the Colonial line and also the Providence line, where a lot of cotton for all these mills in Pawtucket and the Bedford Fall River would all come in there. And these old timers had to take these big iron hand trucks. I mean, they were terrible. My generation started with my father. He was he worked the coal ships. That's all he did mostly, was work the coal ships. It was a back-breaking job. No certain days, no certain hours. I remember my father, when his boss would come and call him 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning, come on, Tony, we got a barge. And they had to go down, they had to go to work. There's nothing you could do. I felt sorry for him, but we didn't realize what he was going through in those days, you know. Really was tough. Really was tough.
The thing that I dreaded seeing the most was Marshall Williams' uncle, Espanol.
Oh, Espanol, yeah.
They were loading, he was wrapping up a load here. They threw the wire underneath, and he was on his knees, reaching under to get the sling. Stanley Montero, God rest his soul, was on the winch, and he was picking up a load from here to go out. And he's a winchman up here now. He didn't see him there, and he picked it up. And as he picked it up, it swung, and it just smashed. I mean, it hit him. And Espanol looked up, and them words ring my ears. He said, "Stanley, why you kill me?" And that was it. And the guy died right there. I never forgot that in my life.
Conditions on the waterfront improved after 1933 when Manuel Culito organized the Cape Verdeans and started the first black union on the eastern seaboard.
Once you all get organized, we work so many hours, and the pay have to be the same. In those days, some guys would get more than some of the other guys. The stevedores, the guy that's well known, he'd get more than the little guy down the bottom because there was no union. But once they get the union, then they couldn't do that anymore.
Right on the heels of the union, a group of men, led by Frank Freitas and Genencino Mello, split off from the Santiago Society, a club with members from Connecticut and Rhode Island, and began the Sant Antonio Society, created in 1934 and Rhode Island's first Cape Verdean beneficent organization. My grandmother, Yen Celestina Andrade, one of the founding members of the club, was the recebrador, or dues collector. The club acted as an insurance company, paying sick and death benefits to dues-paying members, who were mostly unskilled or illiterate laborers. The Depression also brought severe hardship to the Cape Verdean community in rural Cape Cod. In East Wareham, my mother's parents, Serafina and Matilda Montero, struggled to make ends meet for their 10 children. My mother didn't like to talk about working in the cranberry bog. So I asked George Layton, an old friend of my mother's, to tell me what he remembers.
My mother and father were itinerant agricultural workers. They worked on cranberry bogs, strawberry patches, blueberry bushes. That was their work. And that was the first form of occupation that I learned about as a boy laborer. And in the middle of this wetland, there's a projection of land, and on there used to be a 2-story shanty in which we lived. That shanty had no running water. It had no inside toilet. It had no electricity. Had no telephone, no mailbox. We had no car. All of our getting around was by foot. And that's where we lived from March until late November, early December, each year. All our lives were surrounded around the work on the cranberry bog. We weeded the bogs, we sanded, we planted the vines. The harvesting was by stoop labor, hard, back-breaking labor. They never gave me gifts, never gave me bicycles or baseball bats and so forth. But they gave me 2 things: a strong constitution, believing in hard labor. My mother used to say to me in Criollo, when she told me to do something and I began, she would say to me, "Trabalho nunca engana se dono," which means that work never betrays the worker.
Non-whites couldn't get store jobs, whatever. So it was housework, cooking or cleaning. But that was my life because you couldn't do anything else. You weren't allowed to. It was just as bad as the South. As I tell them, there's the South and up South. Well, I lived in up South.
Even with education, the door was closed if your skin was the wrong color, as my mother's friend, Reverend E. Naomi Craig, recalls.
I was the only colored girl that took shorthand and typing. I loved it. I used to take down the minister's sermons in shorthand, type it out, and he would be so thrilled. He said, "Oh, you can do this." While he was talking, I could take it down. And I practiced all the time. When I got out of school, there wasn't one job. I said to the teacher, all of these girls that I've taught, all of these girls that I had to help, they're finding jobs and I'm not finding any. So she called up downtown and she said, "Naomi, you can go down. You have an appointment." So I went down. I was dressed. I had blue shoes. I had a blue suit and a white blouse. And I had a navy blue hat with a little white around the edge. I was looking good. I went down there. There was this crummy-looking little woman. "Yes," she said. "You're Miss Jennings?" I said, "Yes." She said, "Well, we have a job for you up on East Side taking care of these twins." I said, "Oh?" And she said, "And that's a good job, and I think you should be glad to take it." I said, "But what time would I be having for my shorthand and typing?" "Oh, my dear," she said, "there's a depression on. Didn't you know it? And if the white girls can't find jobs, what makes you think that you can find one?" I said, "I didn't think working in an office had anything to do with the color of my skin. I thought it had to do with my ability." I said, "See, I have a certificate for 100 words a minute in shorthand, 80 words a minute in typing, and I can't get a job?" She said, "I'm sorry." She said, "But that's just the way it is." And I said, "Well, thank you." She said, "You don't want the job?" I said, "No, thank you." And I just went out. And you know, I didn't even know I was crying. If she had taken an arrow and shot me in the heart, she couldn't have been more effective.
My mother, the first in her family to graduate from high school, gave up her dream to become a nurse. She said they weren't taking colored. Besides, it was the Depression, and she had to go to work. By early 1938, my mother and her sisters had left the Cape and were doing housework on the wealthy East Side in Providence, with reminders from their elder sister to send money back to their widowed mother. In September, the deadly hurricane of 1938 roared through Providence, inundating downtown and battering the nearby Fox Point neighborhood. People seeking help didn't turn to Holy Rosary, the Catholic Church in Fox Point, largely because of a priest whose mistreatment of Cape Verdeans, black Catholics, was notorious.
I hate to say it, but the church did not hold strong from many of Cape Verdean Catholics, because when they went to get what they could get, clothing or whatever, from them, they would turn them down. So in doing so, one of our Cape Verdean leaders had started a Cape Verdean Protestant church on Sheldon Street.
The Sheldon Street Church was built in 1905 by Manuel Martin, a Cape Verdean from the island of Mayo in Cape Verde, as a mission of the Central Congregational Church and the first Protestant Cape Verdean church in the country.
One of the important places in Fox Point for me was the Sheldon Street Church. My family was a Protestant Cape Verdean family, which is unusual, but my mother had lived once behind a Catholic church in Fox Point, and she didn't like the treatment that she saw being given to some of the Cape Verdeans who came to the door asking for help. And so when she could, she became Protestant.
My mother was already a Protestant because her uncle, John Diaz of Brava, started the Protestant movement in Cape Verde. When she moved to Providence, she became an active member of the Sheldon Street Church, where she met my father, who had converted from Catholicism. They married in 1940 and moved to Planet Street. My parents, two older sisters, and I lived upstairs, and the Lima family lived downstairs. At the bottom of Planet Street, Uncle Charlie and his family lived above Mr. Burns' garage. Upstairs from them were the Mauricios, Rosie Lima's brother and his family. And around the corner on South Main Street were Pat, Rosie and Manny Mauricio's sister, and her boys. In front of the house where the Delgados lived, who were related to the Mauricios. And around the corner while the checkerboard of family, cousins, aunts, and uncles continued all the way down South Main Street. Scattered throughout Fox Point were other immigrants, Eastern Europeans, Greeks, Lebanese, Gypsies, and Jews, who had small shops and businesses. Everybody knew Jaffa, who was Lebanese and owned a little store on South Main Street.
Jaffa sandwiches. He used to give you oil, gallon of oil, wipe his hands without washing it. Jaffa, give me a sandwich. He's going to make you a bologna sandwich. The best tasting sandwich in the world. The best tasting sandwich in the world. He had good sandwiches. He's a good guy. If you didn't have any money, you know, he would put it on the book. You know, Jaffa was just a good person. He was kind, considerate. He knew, you know, that who he was dealing with. You know, people didn't have too much. And, you know, Jaffa didn't have too much need. You know, Jaffa was an immigrant. You know, and, but he had just a little more than we had. So he knew we couldn't pay cash. He would have to wait whenever we got the money, you know, I guess every 2 weeks, every 30 days.
Didn't you have a little book where you'd mark
down? He had the book, put on the book.
Put down credit.
He never ran shop because, you know, if you didn't pay him, he'd stick it on his bill. Never ran shop.
Right.
Mr. Anthony's on Brook Street was a favorite stop for pickles and penny candy.
And Mr. Anthony and his wife were wonderful people. He used to give us candy too for a penny. I never forgot that. Till the day I tried to steal an apple. It was the driest apple in the world. Guess what it was? A potato. I went in the wrong basket. I put my hand I put it in my pocket. And he called my mother and told my mother I was trying to steal an apple, but I stole a potato. My mother made me peel it. I had to cut it up and I had to eat it just like that for supper. Then I had to go down there and apologize and give him his money, full money now, for uncooked potato. I was so embarrassed. And my mother said, look him in the face. I couldn't, I said, because he was so nice to us. He said, why did you steal from me? I said, because I meant to get the apple and I didn't. He said, no, that's not what I'm talking about. Why? I said, well, I didn't mean to take it. I said, well, I'll tell you this, I would have never took your potato had I knew it was a potato. I was being honest, I wanted the apple. So he made me sweep the floor and he gave me an apple. I had to sweep the floor. But that's how they solved things in those days.
What really kept the boys out of mischief was the Boys Club. From the moment the doors opened in 1916, the Boys Club on South Main Street served the urban poor and kept the boys away from the dangers of the streets and juvenile delinquency. The club was a haven from crowded, cold-water tenements with limited indoor plumbing or pull-chain toilets.
When I speak about the old Boys Club, I speak with feeling. My first home was the Boys Club. I've kind of raised up in the Boys Club. We moved from Throckmorton Street to 255 South Main Street, almost directly across from the Boys Club. Now I have my own shower, I have my own swimming pool, I have my own gymnasium. All I had to do was walk across the street from my house to the Boys Club. At that time, it was seasons. You had a basketball season, baseball season, softball season, floor hockey, whatever the season.
Vocational classes, contests, special events, and sports kept the boys off the streets, while their parents worked long hours on the waterfront, factories, or as cooks and domestics at nearby Brown University and the wealthy homes on the east side. Movies were a nickel, and the annual talent show and Parents' Night was always a hit. A highlight of the year was the annual Christmas party that drew hundreds of children. It was more than a club. It was a brotherhood, where friendships were forged that lasted a lifetime. World War II pulled the young men away from Fox Point, where they served in segregated units. Even George Lemer, our downstairs neighbor, who was a commissioned officer. Back in civilian life, they married, had children, and introduced their sons to the Boys Club. 2 generations of Andrade men grew up in the club. The parking lots outside the club behind my house were playgrounds for our gang, all of us friends and cousins. As soon as the cars left the lots at the end of the day and on weekends, we took over. In the summer, we'd be outside from sunup to sundown, playing hopscotch, 7-Up, hide-and-seek, softball, and kickball. Our street was a hill that ran straight into the Providence River. By the 1950s, when I was growing up, the river was polluted and smelled to high heaven at low tide. We kids called it the Stinky Old River. If the ball went out of bounds and rolled down the hill to the water, it was an automatic out, because there were huge water rats and nobody wanted to go down there. Sometimes we'd go to the top of the hill and sneak in over the fence of the big yard, a big grassy space with the best roll down hill. That's until the people inside the John Brown house saw us and chased us out. Then we'd go a little further up the hill to the Brown University campus, where we'd roller skate down those long, smooth paths. Or run errands on South Main Street for our mothers. I remember running back from Jaffa's down South Main Street, passing old-timers with their stern faces and the old country rhythm in their walk. You always saw somebody you knew. I'd peek into the bars along the way, maybe see the big girls all dressed up, just getting out of work or headed downtown. A little further down was the Union Hall. It was always busy there, especially on payday when the guys would shoot craps out in the back. Here comes Uncle Tinny, wearing his pork chop hat. Maybe he was on his way to the Three Lantern Bar over on the corner of Pike and Brook Street. That was where the longshoremen hung out, and it could get kind of rough. Providence was the second best port on the whole East Coast. The Waterfront provided jobs for almost 200 longshoremen. Thanks to Sonny Bento, the savvy business agent for the union, they had a pension plan and good benefits. My father worked the boats to pick up extra money. Whenever a big load of scrap iron or lumber came in, he'd get up at the crack of dawn, grab his hook, and head down to the Union Hall for the shape-up.
Everybody went to work with a hook, and you walk and talk. Just make your load, and there'll be four different sets working in a hole.
The only time you come out of the hole is when you had to go home and eat.
Right.
Hey, there's no big belly longshoreman. All that bending all day long, picking up that lumber. Majority of the guys in good shape.
Everybody was in shape.
Everybody was in good shape. Yeah. They come 12 o'clock, they blow the whistle, go up dinner, the guys just fly up that ladder, 40, 50 foot high, but climb up like it wasn't nothing, you know?
At the end of the day, the men would leave the port of Providence on Allen's Avenue and head back to the point. Maybe they'd find a good card game, or just hang out in front of the Three Lantern Bar. If they bumped into the chief near the barber shop, they'd catch up on union business. Or maybe just step inside the bar to see who was there. Longshoremen by day, musicians by night. They play for Cape Verdean clubs like St. Isabel's, a women's organization, or Saint-Antoine, famous for its cultural activities and dances. The women at the Saint-Antoine Club were some of the best cooks in Fox Point. Mrs. Lima arrived early on the day of a party and began preparing huge pots of canja, chicken soup, and jagacita. People would almost come to blows about whether one of the main dishes was called manchupa or cachupa.
Upper Islands, you know, my mother, people and all of them all said, for manchupa, cachupa, cachup, but cachup. Wow, the lower islands, Brava and Fork and everything, manchup. There's a difference there. So I tell them I like it all. I said, no problem. Now, you know that the cachupa, though, came from the upper islands. And my grandmother was Brava and stuff, but I have to stick strong to that.
After dinner, people would stand out on the porch and wait for Flash and his sister Vicky to arrive and set up for the dance. You could hear the boom, 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 boom of the electric bass, guitars, and violins of the Creole music warming up all the way over to our house a block away.
Oh, mamãe, você dá minha boinha, Pamela Bar, Nayes, Laranjinha. Hoje em dia, tudo tá bem. Quem tem servido e o casca laranja. Passar na rua de Alfanga, hoje grupo de preto mas branco. Perguntar que grupo era aquele. Olha que coisa, é grupo laranja.
The firstborn generation swung into the 1940s. Providence had a reputation for pretty girls and good dancers. The jitterbugs hit the old post road that ran from Rhode Island down the Cape. Or headed to New Bedford to the gee dances, short for Portuguese.
Sundays on South Main Street, it was nice because the men used to put on their phantom light shoes, their peg pants, and their hats, and they were dressed. We would leave our house, and then everyone had like a little clique, like our friends, and we'd get dressed and we'd go down South Main Street and go to Miller's Spa, have a little banana split or an ice cream soda or whatever. Then we'd go down, take a little ride, we'd go take a little walk, we'd go down to Catalos and listen to the Cape Verdean bands that were there, and everybody was there. It was nice. We had a parrot, and, we had a curfew. We used to go out, but we had a curfew. At a certain time, we had to be home. So that parrot, when we used to sneak coming home, and he used to hear us, he used to tell my mother, here they come, and then he used to, ha, 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 you're gonna get a beating, you're gonna get a beating. My mother get up, and you know what my mother used to do to us.
When the grown-ups were at work or went out, we'd go to Granny's house. Granny's Kool-Aid, sugar, and fresh squeezed lemons was a favorite for the grandkids, hands crippled with arthritis. We knew there were Oreo cookies, peanuts, and banana sandwiches, linguiça and eggs to go with the Kool-Aid. Granny's house, or Control Central, as Uncle Dinky called it. Every Sunday after church and on holidays, Granny was at that stove making canja, red kidney beans, manchupa with mandioca. Aunts, uncles, cousins, we packed that 5-room apartment. Uncle Tony, always taking movies. Doing the twist, and learning to dance to Cape Verdean music by watching Granny and her sons. And Grandpa would calmly walk through a sea of grandchildren, with Yenton Maria, our beloved family friend, watching over all of us. If we weren't at Granny's, we'd visit family in New Bedford, take a summer trip to Grandma's cottage on York Street in Nantucket, drive down the Cape to East Wareham to Granny Montero's house in the middle of woods, blueberry bushes, and cranberry bogs. And for all of our big parties and events, everyone went to the Cape Verdean Progressive Center in East Providence, founded in 1951 to serve the immigrant community. People came from all over for the first celebration of the Mastu, built like a ship's mast, decorated with greens, fruits, breads, vegetables, and put up in Brava between June and August to celebrate the Saints' Days. I only remember going outside the Cape Verdean community for school, church, and the Girl Scouts, but we never went to the black community.
Oh, I'll tell you what I remember. The expression gentes pretos, black people. When I was a boy in New Bedford growing up, I heard said among Creole people that I knew, you couldn't, you weren't supposed to associate with people in the West Side. That was the attitude. I remember being told of some Cape Verdean girls who were ostracized by the Cape Verdean community because they had something to do with some people out in the West Side. That's what I was told.
What would the basis of that animosity be?
I don't know. I don't know, but I assume the racism that existed subtly, covertly. That was the explanation. It doesn't pay to become associated with a group that was disfavored.
Cape Verde society is like the Brazilian society and the Cuban society. We see it today with them. You had those that look like they're Bronx, look like very European, very white, and could be your sisters and brothers. Then you had the other bunch that was very dark, very African. All of a sudden they come to America. Now we're splitting. We're not parting financially. We're parting color-wise. And I'll never forget, Tilly King was downtown, and he told me, he said, he saw different ones working on the counter, cosmetic counter, and he said, oh, those are my cousins. And one Irish kid said to him, a friend of his, those are not your cousins. Yes, they are. So he said, no. He said, the little Irish kid said, those girls are white. You know, they don't put white girls, they don't put colored girls on a cosmetic counter. They put them on the elevators and stuff, right? So he said, I'm telling you, those are cousins of mine. So whatever way it went, the little kid went and told somebody else. He got back upstairs in the office of the Shepherds. And next thing you know, the girls lost their jobs. They told them they could keep their jobs, but they could take on their jobs as elevator operators as opposed to working on the cosmetic counter. Of course, the girls in the elevator operator didn't want them there either because many days they walked by them and they didn't talk.
The Cape Verdean community in Fox Point was able to build a buffer against discrimination because of our control of the waterfront, the main source of income for the community that made us self-sufficient. Our lives revolved around the longshoremen. Their annual picnic was a party for everyone in the point. As usual, Aunt Pat, one of the best cooks in the family, had a hand in making the food. And her brothers, Kenny and Bobby Oliveira, brought it in for the home team. The second generation, born in the 40s and 50s like me, were still wrapped up in the cocoon of our neighborhood and families. By then, American-born Cape Verdeans were making a mark in the outside world. The American dream of education for the children in Fox Point became a reality in 1954 when a brand new elementary school was built.
This was a school that your mother campaigned for. All around this neighborhood, she was going around for people to sign to have a new school in this area. And they built the school down there. It wasn't really in this area where they were going to put it in the beginning because it would have displaced so many people. So they put it down there where there were no houses, right in the Tockwatton Park. And that's where the school was, and your mother was the one that was going through the neighborhoods, getting people to know that we were going to have a new school here.
My middle sister was in one of the first classes at the new elementary school, and me, the youngest by far of my sisters, entered there in kindergarten. My sisters were academic stars and gifted musicians. My oldest sister was the first girl from the Point to go to college, closely followed by my other sister. I remember the frantic preparation for the feature story in the Providence Journal, complete with my father sitting in a Ozzie and Harriet pose behind us. Later that night, at a big benefit dance for my sister at the Cape Verdean Club in East Providence, I posed again, at the wishing well for contributions to our college fund, and filled with dreams of a brighter future for the new generations born in America. It was the 1960s, and weren't we sharp? Looking sharp, spending all Saturday morning getting that hair conked, but it was worth it. Looking pretty, swaggering down Brook Street to Wicked and standing on the corner to see and be seen. Longshoremen on a day off, a Sunday, holiday, or Easter. Whatever day it was, you know you could count on Johnny and his boys to be up to something.
Oftentimes, when we got over, the guy said, Johnny, let's go to Boston, let's go here, let's go there. You take Fox Point, put it on a trailer truck, then I'll go. I'm not leaving Fox Point. Everything I want is right there. What's your hall, your stores, your restaurants, your gas station, the boys club, I didn't need to go anywhere. I didn't have to leave Fox Point.
For the Andrade gang, Granny's house was still Control Central on Easter Sunday in 1969. The first great-grandchild getting some of Granny's famous linguiça and eggs. My gang from Planet Street, me and Shell, important teenagers now, even though my father still pulled us by the ears. Donna digging for boogers, and Mel without her front tooth. My cousin Kathy came up from the Cape with her family, Woody still acting the fool, and cool Daddy-O Joe with his dark shades. Now we posed on the wall of the lots where we used to roller skate, Shell being Sophia Loren, and me showing off my new bell-bottoms and loafers, with Fifi, Shell's cousin from Connecticut, just hanging out with the big girls. Over off Well Street, Woody and Baba were turning from frogs into handsome princes. While we were self-absorbed teenagers, our parents were beginning to get letters that a renewal project to upgrade the East Side had been approved by the city and the federal government.
The first time I knew that something was happening in South Main Street was down by the pool. And the city came and put horses in the middle of the street. And we asked, what are you doing that for? He said, we're going to make this in one way. I said, why? He said, you know what? He said, they're going to knock down all them houses. That's the first time city worker told. I said, no way. No way.
Urban renewal and gentrification in Fox Point meant Cape Verdean removal. Scores of Cape Verdean families were displaced.
They told us, well, we're going to fix these houses up. We're going to knock some of them down. We're going to fix them up. And you're going to be the first ones to come in. But little that we know, we couldn't afford these houses here.
The Providence Development Agency said that the families had to move. They were going to do this, they were going to do that, they were going to do this. So the people, they panicked. They panicked, and a lot of them got nervous. They started to move out. Some went to East Providence, and they went to different areas.
When I lived on Rican Street, my landlord wanted us out. He jacked my rent up $300. If I was paying $300 then, I would have, he was charging me $600. He said, well, because of the taxes, whatever excuses they use, we have to go up on the rent. I said, oh, that's no problem. I thought it was going to be something reasonable. He said, well, you're not going to like it. I said, what are you doing? $300. I said, you want me out, buddy, that bad? I've been here 20 years, man. You want me out?
Which house was this?
The one where the coffee shop is at now.
I had the same thing happen, Claire. Almost double my rent. Yeah. And I found another place.
But he did me a favor.
Just by luck.
Now I got to go look. He forced me to buy. He did me a favor.
The few who owned put up a fight to avoid having their homes condemned.
I knew that this was a catch here. We had the Fox Point Neighborhood Association then. And in that association, we found out that we could fix our houses up and we could still stay here and we could live here. We fixed our places up, those whose houses need to be fixed up. This neighborhood looked great. And those who figured that, well, where they're going to tear down different things here, we might as well moved out. But they were sorry that they moved out. Because after they moved out, the rents went sky high.
Well, my mother said that she was not going to move. The only way that she was going to move was they would have to take her out of there in her coffin. So finally, she called up John Murphy, which was our councilman at the time. So he came to visit her. And he also brought Robert Clarkin, which is our councilman now. And she told him, she says, John, they want me to move. She says, after all, you don't move mountains. So could you please help me? He says, Mrs. Alves, Mamai, I'll see what I can do for you. Today, our house is still standing, and we thank John Murphy. And he came and he told Mrs. Alves, you're saved, you can stay, your house is, you don't have to move.
The construction of Interstate 195 began in the 1960s and cut the Cape Verdean community right in half. Johnny was part of the fight to push 195 a few hundred feet over to save his house.
I'm an owner now. They want to expand, they're going to expand 195. Now they were going to take my side of 195 and knocked my house down again. I says, I'm not going.
The Sinton Town Club wasn't so lucky. They were notified in 1966 by the redevelopment agency that their building on Power Street was condemned. Their building was knocked down, and they were forced to leave their home since 1949 and relocate to the far end of Fox Point. In 1974, the club was in trouble. Membership was dropping as Cape Verdeans were leaving the point in droves. Only a handful of members were there in 1984 to celebrate the 50th anniversary dinner, and the acknowledgement of the club by Senator Chafee and Mr. Mello, who had served with distinction for decades as president. So the club sat there, alone, in the shadow of Interstate 195, that reshaped the destiny of Fox Point for future generations of Cape Verdeans.
First, they said they wanted to build a Catholic school, and they wanted to do this, they wanted to do that.
And through all these years, they've never done nothing down there. All them people moved away for nothing.
The Holy Rosary has the parking lot facing Travis. They have the parking lot facing Brook Street, and they have across the street.
Down the street from the Owl's house was the Three Lantern Bar. After it was condemned in the late 1960s, Uncle Bobby and his friends reoccupied the bar. It was reborn as Poor People's Park, the unofficial refugee camp for Cape Verdeans who still lived in the point and those who had been displaced. Uncle Charlie, my cousin Charlene, Toddy and Al Pereira, and Manny Perry played deep chords that would make your heart cry. And we were crying, because we knew we were losing the point. Poor People's Park was bulldozed in the early 1970s. Manny Almeida's Lounge was the Cape Verdeans' last stand on Wickeden Street. It was Cape Verdean turf, where the worlds of the longshoremen and locals mingled with students from nearby Brown University. But the negative perception from Brown University and the wealthy people on the east side about Manny Almeida's, and by extension the Cape Verdean community, was a deadly combination.
Somebody in Brown had put out the story, and I don't think it was all of Brown, that Fox Point was very hostile towards students and they wouldn't be nice to them. And as far as I can remember, all the students that came down, everybody was nice to them. Everybody was nice to the students. Because a lot of kids were away from home. And you ask anybody, any of the kids came from Brown, even those that have grown now, married and everything else, they never had any problem with Fox Point. And we never, as kids in Fox Point, we never had no problem with the people up on Cook Street and all those houses up there. They were wonderful to us. The wealthier people, we used to go there for Christmas and sing cantares, do Christmas carols and stuff. And they would give us all kind of gifts of fruit and everything. They were wonderful to us. And I wouldn't say anything bad about them. They were just wonderful. But the way they made it sound like it was them and us, and that wasn't true at all.
The community lost the tug of war between Brown University, Interstate 195, Historic Preservation, Providence Redevelopment Agency, and Holy Rosary Church. After Manny Almeida's closed in the early 1980s, Wickeden Street became quiet.
Now the Brown University's taken over now. And all these little fancy shops on Wickeden Street, coffee shops and antique shops, and the old timers could come back, they wouldn't believe what was going on.
You know what gets me so mad is now, the other day, now they call Fox Point the Lower East Side. And I told them, I said, this is not the Lower East Side, this is Fox Point. I said, I've been born and raised in Fox Point, you know? They call it the Lower East Side.
We all tried to hang on. Aunt Pat and Uncle Charlie were forced to move, and they went to East Providence. At their house, Uncle Charlie, as usual, got the music going, but it didn't feel right. It just didn't feel right.
Ai que nunca no encontraba, porque sofriba, esta sofri. Minha tristeza que te acaba, nunca me esperava se bobai se despedir. Minha tristeza que te acaba, nunca me esperava se bobai se despedir. Ai Deus, que sabias merecer onde botar Nemo.
Today, the Boys Club, now the Boys and Girls Club, is the lonely survivor of the Cape Verdean community in Fox Point.
You know, as Bobby was talking, I couldn't help but remember when I first became mayor back in 1974, there was a real celebration that went on, and it had to do with the dedication of the Fox Point Boys and Girls Club. And I said something there that I never thought that would hold true for 30 more years, or certainly 25 more years, certainly through 3 decades. And that was that Fox Point would continue to be an example after all these years of people living together from different backgrounds, different races, different heritage groups, and still sharing in a commonality of good neighborliness. And that's what Fox Point, I think, means to me.
On April the 4th, 1998, Pike Street has been changed to Alves Way. We were the oldest family in Fox Point, and we were the only family living there. They decided that it would have been nice if it been named Alves Way after the family, and we appreciate it every.
That's enough. That's enough.
I don't know, but I played a lottery, and I played to win the big money. If I ever won $100 million, I would bring my people back to Fox Point.
Good friends, God is the great and the only builder. And unless the Lord builds a house, those who build in vain. So we ask your blessings, Father, on my niece, Claire, who you planted this seed in her mind to bring this project to a successful conclusion. We ask you to bless her and to bless all of those here who have helped her in this endeavor.
Hi, Claire. As I said last night, all praises come to God. And I thank him very, very much for his putting all this beautiful thoughts in your mind and letting it come to pass. I thank you for this opportunity, my brother Flash and I being there for a very special night. You take care, and the peace of the Lord be with you and all around you. So long for now, and God bless.
Jesus, faithful shepherd. Jesus, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me lie down